Thank you for joining me for this exclusive expose into Hillary Clinton's critical and debilitating medical crisis, where right now you will learn the truth. Beyond a shadow of a doubt that Hillary Clinton has Parkinson's disease, you will learn the facts, the symptoms that she is exhibiting from a certified physician who has now gone public with a diagnosis that is being hidden from the public's eye. Joining me now is Dr. Ted Noel. He was trained at Loma Linda University Medical Center, spent 32 years practicing critical care and anesthesia at Florida Hospital, 10 years as the medical director with the Novamed Surgical Center. Welcome to the Next News Network, Dr. Noel.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, 24 hours ago, you emailed me after seeing my report where Hillary nearly faints on stage. You know, everyone's seen the video now. It's gone viral. She's pacing back and forth. She's wearing her orange pantsuit. Loud noise, applause. She looks around. She looks dazed. She loses her place. She doesn't even continue the train of thought in the proper place. It looks like she nearly faints. Now, in your email stated, quote, "That near fainting episode you reported on is almost certainly a Parkinson's disease freeze." Now, before we get into your observation and diagnosis about what happened there, let's address what the world witnessed on Labor Day. Another event in Cincinnati, the mad coughing fit, near vomiting, spitting up. Yet the campaign has dismissed it as talking too much. What do you believe the world witnessed on that day?
Well, first of all, that's not the first fit. She's had so many coughing episodes. There's a YouTube video listing them all, and they're all extended. This is almost certainly related to her Parkinson's disease. A swallowing disorder is one of the most common problems in Parkinson's, and it ultimately is the cause of death in more Parkinson's patients than anything else because they get saliva into the lungs, aspirate, and get pneumonia. Imagine if you were to swallow, you get liquid on your vocal cords, you are going to cough, cough, cough. And that's probably what's happening with her. She's just, because she can't swallow properly, she ends up getting saliva on the vocal cords.
Now, on your website, you make the charge that Hillary Clinton has had Parkinson's disease for at least 10 years. You state that she has known about it for all of that time, yet her campaign shows a complete disregard for America in their own pursuit of personal graft. Now, how do you know that she's what makes you believe that she's had this for 10 years? And how is she keeping it quiet?
Well, there are a couple of things going on. For example, there's a problem called Parkinson's disease levodopa-induced dyskinesia, which is where you have that big head bobbing episode where, two reporters asked a question, the balloon drop where she goes through that funky posture. And those things are signs of progressive side effects from levodopa, which is really the only drug out there to treat the disease. And they happen in everybody's case after at least 10 years of taking it, and it can occur as quickly as 5 years. But if we backtrack and we look at the probable sequence, the public record suggests that it starts in 2005 with a fall. And then in 2009, she breaks her elbow. Then in 2012, she has the fall where she gets the concussion. If we look at that, we've got 11 years since the first public record event that's reasonably attributed to Parkinson's disease. And on the side here, please don't take this as a definitive diagnosis. This is my best conclusion based on the evidence that's in the public record.
Now, on your website, you've outlined what you've called a field guide to Hillary Clinton's Parkinson's disease. We will link to it below. I've got a copy of it here. 10 primary points that you say definitively, essentially, proves her condition. We got tremors, freezes, slow movement, Parkinson's, like you just mentioned, dyskinesia. You've got PD postures, signs of swallowing disorder, rigidity, impaired balance, loss of automatic movements, speech changes. This is a pretty detailed list. Now, I want to go through each one. But first, that picture that everyone has seen where she's struggling to walk up the stairs really, I think, set off a lot of people. The optics were horrible for the campaign, aside from all the coughing fits. What do you make of that moment that the world witnessed when she was trying to walk up those stairs? Couldn't even get up them.
Well, she has two people supporting her, and if you look, there are actually two pictures that are published, and it appears that she needs help in just simply staying upright. This would fit with Parkinson's disease where you get lower extremity weakness. Now, mind you, if I say she's got weakness, that doesn't mean all the time, because her treatment will make her better and she gets worse. She gets better, she gets worse. So what you see at any moment in time is not necessarily what you're going to see an hour later or a day later.
Now, let's address the discussion of the tremors. The first point in your field guide to Hillary's Parkinson's disease. Explain.
Okay, the tremors, you have two or three things that happen. They are repetitive tremors at rest. The classic one is called a pill rolling tremor, and basically you have this kind of emotion as if you're rolling a pill between your thumb and your forefinger. We've not really seen good evidence of that. I spotted it once, but it wasn't clear enough to put into a video. And she does various things to avoid us seeing it. A lot of times she's holding things, a microphone, puts her hand on her chest, hand on her wrist, basically keeping her hands busy so that they are not at rest to show the tremor. The one that she does show a lot is the head nodding tremor, which is where she does this. And when Bernie Sanders endorsed her, Bloomberg News counted 408 nods. That's a head nodding tremor. It's very common in Parkinson's.
Wow, 408 nods. That's pretty significant in one moment now. Let's talk about the freezes. We mentioned it a few moments ago in that viral video of her walking on stage. Sudden stoppage, normal activity when brain basically shuts down. Explain how you've witnessed this, besides that obvious video that's gone viral.
Well, there are several of them, and there are a couple of videos that have gone viral. You have the one where she is speaking, and all of a sudden there's a disturbance in the audience, and she just freezes. And this attendant comes over and talks to her and says, "It's okay, we're still here, keep on talking." And he has to tell her again, "Keep on talking," and then she breaks out of it. You have the one at the balloon drop where suddenly she sees something, and all of a sudden her head comes up in what we call an oculogyrate crisis. And there are probably 3 or 4 others out there. Basically what happens in a freeze, you either have a visual stimulus, some item of stress. Oh, the one where she does the head bobbing, you have 2 people ask the question at once. Or it can happen randomly, and essentially what happens is a brain that was working at the level of you and me right now suddenly turns into, I can see what's happening, but I can't get anything out to do anything that I can control. And one of the classic descriptions comes from Northwest Parkinson's Foundation, where one of the sufferers says, "I'm walking along, and in short, the freeze hits, I fall over. I can't do anything about it."
Now, what about this slow movement you describe here?
Bradykinesia.
Yeah, bradykinesia, shorter than normal steps, dragging feet. Is that what we would? Do you believe that's what we saw in that picture, where she's struggling to get up the stairs?
But that's a still picture. You know, from a still photo, you have trouble determining what was actually going on. One of the things that the people who are taking care of her do is they make sure she doesn't really expose some of these things. So you make sure her medications are good. So when she walks on stage, sometimes she'll look really good. And she'll walk with a nice brisk step, and her arms will swing normally. Other times her steps are a little slower, they're a little shorter, her arms don't swing as well, or she may be holding on to someone. Those could be the bradykinesias. Again, these are things that are a little hard to tell from the public record. But when you're looking for them, you say, that looks like it.
Okay, let's go down to point. Okay, so we've gone through tremors, point 1, freezes, point 2, 3, the slow movement. Now, you touched on this a moment ago. Number 4, Parkinson's disease, levodopa-induced dyskinesia may be triggered by flashes or loud sounds and randomly without warning. Go into great detail here.
Okay. Levodopa is the only real medicine that's used for Parkinson's. It's the only one that works well. And basically what it does is it supplies a precursor so the body can replace dopamine, which is being lost. And unfortunately, it has a side effect that at 5 years to 10 years, you start seeing these strange movements. Dyskinesia means bad movement. And so what happened at the balloon drop is she literally froze, and then a dyskinesia took up where her head came up, her eyes went over, she looked this way, her eye went back this way with this giant open mouth and the bug eyes. and then she was able to bring it back. That's a PDLID. The other one that's famous right now is when the two reporters asked her the question and she goes through this head bopping thing and then says, "You've got to try the cold chai.
What was the last part? You try the what?
You have to try the cold chai." She was aware of what was happening, but she couldn't control it. And when it settled down in a few seconds, she was able to try to make a recovery.
Also, what you're stating is that when she said try the cold chai, that was her attempt to discount her behavior as some sort of a brain freeze.
Right. And Lisa Lehrer, who was one of the reporters, said, "Oh, it was nothing. She was making a joke."
Okay. Well, let's get on to this next point. PD postures, bug eyes, abnormally wide smile, open mouth, uncomfortable or unnatural hand positions. Where do you see these?
The common ones are the bug eyes. Almost every Parkinson's sufferer gets it. And if you look at the picture from the balloon drop, you really see them prominent there. Other postures, we talk about the abnormal hand position. The one that she does the most is trying to get her hand into this kind of position. If you look at this is really, it's an uncomfortable, unnatural position. You have the third finger on top of the others. You tuck the little finger under and the thumb under, and she uses this gesturing. And what's happening is, because she's not thinking about her hand, she's thinking about answering a question, she ends up with the Parkinson's taking over, so that you get the abnormal hand position.
Now, we've witnessed this next point pretty obviously lately, especially what happened in Cincinnati. It looked like she almost gagged and vomited on the stage. You listed as a swallowing disorder. It almost appears as though in some of the video, when you slow it down, it looks like she's almost spitting something up at the same time. Pretty strange behavior. Explain how this relates to Parkinson's.
Well, swallowing disorders, remember, Parkinson's comes from destruction of the substantia nigra, which is one of the coordination centers in the brain. And ultimately, swallowing requires good coordination of several muscle groups. And it gets uncoordinated, and she got something down the wrong way. Now, she may have had a throat lozenge at the time. That'll increase your salivation a little bit. But once you get that material down the wrong way, now you're into coughing, sputtering, and a severe coughing fit can almost look like you're ready to throw up.
Well, that's what I saw. You know, I had to edit that video down, and I mentioned it. It was very nauseating, actually, because I see this gag reflex occurring, and you know, I almost felt like throwing up myself because it was so obvious. Mm-hmm. And that's how I instinctively knew what I was witnessing, simply because my personal gag reflex was triggered by her gag reflex.
Mm-hmm. Now, go ahead.
Now, you mentioned this next point is rigidity, loss of fluidity in general body motions, wooden facial expressions. That's kind of a funny way to put it, but I guess it's a pretty serious medical condition.
Well, yes, and again, this is one of the things that as her handlers work on treating her, they make sure that her levodopa levels are high enough to suppress those. And if you're with good levodopa levels at a moment, and you only have moderate Parkinson's, which is probably where she is, you can be very natural in the way you look. But when those levels get off, and the problem is it's unpredictable when they're going to get off, you may find yourself shuffling your feet. You may find yourself not expressing yourself as fluently with your facial expressions and other things of the sort. But now, again, these are things where if you know what you're looking for, you see them, but a lot of people won't see them because they're not trained.
So the general public is just passing over these realities.
Right, and when Hillary's camp says, "Oh, there's nothing to see here," they go, "Okay."
Yeah, they just discounted the campaign's always right. But being a medical doctor, before we get into some of the other points, I mean, there's a few more points left to go on. But being a medical doctor yourself, and I'm sure you talk to other doctors, you've probably shared this information with other people. How are other doctors receiving your observations?
Well, again, because I'm retired now, I don't spend a lot of time in the hospital talking with other doctors. But the ones I have talked to all look at it and they go, "Makes perfect sense to me."
What about this picture we've seen repeatedly. There's a gentleman at her side. It's the same guy that went up and whispered in her ear on stage. And of course, there's this talk of him holding some sort of a device. Maybe it could be a flashlight. It could be an injector. What do you make of that claim?
I'm not going to pursue that one. It's possible that it's a flashlight. The picture just simply lacks the resolution to go anywhere. It could be an auto-injector syringe of a drug called apomorphine, and the brand name on that is APOKYN, Apokin. And that is used for people who start to get Parkinson difficulties to get a quick boost to get up and out of them to function.
Now, you say you don't want to go down that rabbit hole, per se, but
I'm not going to make a conclusion on that.
Sure, but people have said it's just a flashlight. But we should point out that the photograph was taken in broad daylight, and carrying a flashlight in the middle of the day seems like an odd device to be carrying. Wouldn't you agree with me there?
Well, that would be odd. One other site suggested it was a laser pointer where they walk along and you just say, let's go over here, and you point with the laser.
Okay, I've also seen cats chase laser pointers too. Let's talk about this next point. Point number 8, impaired balance. You say difficulty walking, standing, manifested by gripping lecterns, handrails, physically supporting, being physically supported. We've shown the photograph a number of times already on this report, being helped up the stairs. We did another report that definitively she's being held up on a stand by 3 different people. So is that where you're getting this point?
Well, that's a standard Parkinson's disease problem, and I didn't get it from those reports, but those reports show what would fit with the story.
What other reports have you seen where you believe there's impaired
Well, I've
balance?
seen one where she's out talking and she's got somebody very obviously holding one side of her up because she needs extra support. And she's trying to go on with the speech. But I saw a still photo. I didn't see a video.
So the impaired balance, how is that related to the Parkinson's?
Well, it's part of Parkinson's. And if you lack strength in your legs, you lack the strength to maintain balance. And so if you're at a point where you're going down in terms of your function because you're Parkinson's disease, you'll get better, you get worse, you get better, you get worse, and it's on an hourly to daily basis. And so if you're in the downside on it, you may have weak legs, and if you don't have the strength to maintain balance, you're not going to have good balance.
Now let's go to your next point here. Loss of automatic movements, reduced blinking. This will create a staring sort of look, a loss of arm swing while walking, persistence of smile beyond socially acceptable limits. Now, we certainly have seen some very strange photographs of her in these very, very bizarre facial expressions, very bizarre smiles. Talk to us about this loss of automatic movements, its relation to Parkinson's, and of course Hillary's diagnosis.
Well, the problem we've got here is trying to put it all together, because you see the extra big smile where it's just way too big out here, the unnaturally open mouth. It fits. It's probably the case. But some of the others where you lose the automatic movement, once again, if you've got a team that's trying to make sure that you're being taken care of well, you're going to have enough levodopa on board that a lot of that isn't going to be seen very often.
Now, the levodopa, how often is that taken? What's the general?
Well, part of the problem with dosing levodopa is its absorption, and so you're going to change how often you take levodopa based on how well you're doing. Sometimes, food will make it not absorb well. You have something else going on. GI motility isn't quite as good. You don't absorb. So it becomes a difficult proposition on how often you take it. And it really requires the direct intervention in deciding how often to do it. And I'm not going to go into that any further.
Now, when we see these individuals around her, like most recently in Cincinnati, it looked like her vice presidential pick, Tim Kaine. He was right there. He had something in his pocket. I believe that they were lozenges of some sort. It appears as though she had lozenges. There was another aide that came up. I mean, everybody was at the ready with what appeared to be lozenges. Do you believe that's what they were?
Oh yeah, well, it's pretty obvious, and I've seen her do it herself, where she's opening what's obviously a cough drop.
Hmm.
And that's no surprise. If you have a regular coughing problem, you're going to carry cough drops to try to make life better.
Now, before we get into number 10, which is the speech changes, let's talk about the coughing, because in this list I don't see the cough. Well, I guess signs of swallowing is a persistent cough, but we're really seeing it starting to manifest more and more. I mean, that moment in Cincinnati just caught me off guard on Labor Day. So tell us,
Well,
what are you seeing with this just increasing coughing fits, and what does it mean for her, the progression of her disease?
well, let's back up just a minute. If you look at the signs that we saw for all of everything else, we didn't see all that much until spring of this year. And then we have just a treasure trove of videos. And what you're looking at is progression of the disease. And if her coughing is more frequent than it was, her swallowing disorder is getting worse. You continue on, you look at these other things. Ultimately, what's happening is we're seeing the disease get worse, and it will have other problems where she shuts off. We've talked about freezes. We haven't even talked about off states. When your drug level gets down, a lot of times you can be in an off state, and it may last for days. My friend with Parkinson's and I will have Skype conversations, and he'll say, I got to go do something. I'll call you back in an hour. And I hear from him 2 days later. And what's happened is during that hour, he hit an off state and wasn't able to do anything for 2 days.
So is that why we're seeing these gaps in time where, well, first of all, she doesn't do press conferences, hundreds
Oh,
and hundreds of days without press conferences, and then of course she just disappears. She goes on these. She's gone. Like
I would
no one can find her. Is that what you believe is perhaps
I
happening there?
would speculate that what's happening is she's only able to get tuned up for partial duty.
Hmm.
And when you look at partial duty, you're also looking at someone who has to have all the time away from it. And that's the way I see what she's probably doing. Um, the press conference issue is a very specific concern because flashbulbs are a very sharp visual disturbance, multiple questions at once, which is typical from from reporters at a press conference. They cause stress. Those things would cause freeze episodes. And so if she did a presser, all of a sudden you're going to see video of her freezing again, and it's going to be obvious.
Now let's talk. We do have this last point, speech changes, I want to get to, but you mentioned the progression of the disease and the coughing fits we're seeing accelerate. On a timeline of somebody with Parkinson's, what are we going to see in 6 months? What are we going to see in a year?
The problem here is that it's so highly variable, and trying to make a detailed prediction it's a fool's errand. All you can say is that it will get worse. And what she has already is a situation where the 3 a.m. phone call is going to go to voicemail.
Well, that certainly would put America in a crisis situation, especially if she can't answer that phone in that moment of need. Now, let's get to point number 10 here. Speech changes. Words may not be as clear. Speech may hesitate. Speech may be somewhat monotone. Talk to us about that and how that's related to her Parkinson's.
Well, once again, that's progressive in the Parkinson's, and we haven't really seen any of that because, again, she has the best medical care you can get. But what happens is that this will creep through, and if she is on the stage 24/7 as a president, you're going to start seeing that.
Now, we've got this offstage moment, progression. I mean, I'm looking at the website here, Hillary's History of Health, okay, 2009. Fell, broke her elbow. She suffered a concussion. Huma Abedin says that she's often confused. Explain how that is related.
Okay. Remember, the premise here is that the 3 falls are a result of Parkinson freezes. That's the premise. The third one is the one in December of 2012 where she gets the concussion. Now, January is when that email about she's often confused comes. That's probably during the post-concussion recovery period. And that, along with those funky glasses where the one lens has the Fresnel in it, those are part of the concussion recovery. The problem we've had in the press is that everybody has taken the concussion as a starting point, not even raising the question of whether the concussion is actually an effect of the underlying problem or a cause.
Right, you say here after the 2012 fall, Hillary Rodham Clinton had post-concussion syndrome. She should have declared herself unable to fulfill her duties as Secretary of State. Her resignation from the position shortly thereafter may have satisfied this need without public medical discussion. That is a pretty strong statement.
Well, it's a statement of speculation, but here's the deal. If you've got somebody who clearly has a post-concussion syndrome, and she had that transverse sinus thrombosis along with it, this is a big-time neurologic event. And she'd already said she was only going to serve for 4 years. So, I mean, she did that long time before. So why wouldn't she just say, look, I'm out a month early? Mm-hmm. You know, be honest and forward, say, I got problems right now. Once I get over them, then we'll see what my public life looks like. Instead, she hung in until her replacement could be seated.
Now, let's talk about briefly Dr. Drew. I'm sure you heard the suppressed report that ABC memory hold that thing. They didn't want that out in the public. They deleted it off their website. Of course, Steadfast Patriots resurrected it, and it's now made the rounds. And then we saw the unfortunate aftermath of Dr. Drew's show being canceled for speaking out.
Yeah.
Now they're saying they want him to recant his statements. So did you hear his diagnosis?
I read about the details of it, and essentially what he's looking at is, one, she's got a big neurologic problem, and that's what got him fired. The issues he picked later were with which drugs she was being treated. For example, Armour thyroid, which is reported to cause a hypercoagulable state, which would potentially lead to the clot in the transverse sinus. He basically picked flaws on with those things, but he didn't address the idea that she might have an underlying neurologic problem that led to these others.
All right, so before we go, what's your final message to the American people regarding this condition? She wants to be the commander-in-chief of this great nation, yet it appears as though we're seeing, look, I interviewed the Secret Service officer that stood outside the Oval Office door. He said, don't believe her medical records. Those were his words. Anything that comes out of the campaign. We saw Dr. Drew. He cited the medical records that have been made public. So, given all of this, what is your final message to the American people about her Parkinson's disease?
First, as I said before, this is my working conclusion. I'm not her treating physician, so I can't say it's her diagnosis. But she very clearly has a major neurologic problem. The public record contains evidence that matches Parkinson's disease, so it has to be the highest item on the list of possibilities. Parkinson's disease is a completely disqualifying condition for any position of responsibility. My friend with Parkinson's had to sell 8 businesses because he could no longer serve to manage them because of his Parkinson's. If she has Parkinson's disease, as evidenced by these freeze events that we see, it's very clear that anytime there is stress, and guess what? The presidency is the highest stress job in the world. She can turn into an off state and functionally be Woodrow Wilson with a stroke.
All right. Dr. Noel, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for
You're most welcome.
For your analysis and for speaking out when other people, like Dr. Drew, he's losing his position. So
well, you'll find a lot of other doctors who are in practice will refuse to comment. And the reason they won't is that it's real easy for Medicare to come down and do an audit, and all of a sudden everything they've earned for the last 3 years may be forfeit.
All right, folks, the website for Dr. Noel is vidzet.com, vidzette.com. We will link to it in the description, as well as to the documentation that supports Dr. Noel's claims of his observations, Parkinson's disease. So there you have it. Once again, Dr. Noel, thank you for joining us.
And thank you.
All right, folks, hit the links in the description. Do the research. You'll find out for yourself. Now, if you're not a doctor, then you may have to rely on this doctor's word. Comment below, subscribe for updates. This is not something that you will see on the mainstream press. MSNBC, CNN, yeah, right. They'll never touch this with a 10-foot pole, but we're willing to go on the line and bring this information to you and bring you the doctor who has made the observations himself. So comment below, subscribe for updates. Spread this around on social media. Blow up the social media. Do your part to save America from this demonic presence of Hillary Clinton from entering into the Oval Office. For the Next News Network, I'm Gary Franchi.
Hillary for Prison shirts now available. Link in the description.